Welcome to the Heat of Command podcast, Mastering the Art of Fire Service Leadership,
where we, your hosts, aim to teach you how to use introspection and self-reflection to be your most authentic, genuine self, leader, and human being.
And now, here are your hosts. This is Kyle Matusik.
And Kerry Henderson. Thanks for joining. Welcome back to our listeners. And I'm just going to start off today, Kyle, and say from a humble place, we don't quite know where this episode might go. We're going to wing this one. We have a couple of ideas of some things we want to talk about, but not 100% sure. We don't have an outline this time, which we never have an outline.
No,
but
we don't.
sometimes we have so much we want to talk about. We struggle with how to fit it all into one or two episodes. But today we have some general ideas and we're winging this one. But we want to talk today about motivation, personal motivation, and what we do or what we think people do to stay motivated in your job, at home, in your life, and some things we've tried and what to do and how to really, for me, it's more about noticing when I'm lacking motivation because sometimes I don't even notice it. I'm just in this like blah kind of funk. And then I'm like, what do I need to do to get back in the game, to kind of get back rolling where I want to be? And then I also kind of wanted to talk about some personal development stuff, like what we have done. And I think it really ties together. It ties together your personal development and what you're doing to work on yourself. And I think that ties into motivation. I'm not quite sure yet how we're going to wrap this all into one nice, neat package. It's never a nice, neat package, but we're going to talk about those things today. So I don't know about you, Kyle. I'm ready for this cold weather to kind of break. We're getting some nice days here in Virginia, but they're not consistent. But I always feel like this time of year and then sometimes in the winter, I kind of get in this like blah. But when the summer comes and the nice weather breaks, I'm ready to go running and I'm ready to like do all the things and tackle all the projects and clean my whole house out. And at work, I'm 1,000 miles an hour. But sometimes I just get in this place where I'm at work and I'm like, okay, I'm here. I got to get some motivation to really tackle some stuff. And so I'm going to throw out some of the things that I've done that helped me a little bit. And then maybe you can shout out some things. I know you're in a tough place, where you are in your career right now. And like, what are you doing for that? What are you doing to kind of keep it going at work? So.
Wait, was that a question for me?
Well, I mean, that's a hard one to just throw out and start with.
But...
So maybe we'll build up to that part. But for me, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say how, you're saying how cold it is in Virginia and we're getting snow today. So
Really?
I don't want to hear it, Kerry.
Oh.
But yeah, my wife calls it seasonal depression and, it's just the lows. And, fortunately this spring or winter for us here, it wasn't that cloudy. Usually it's a lot cloudier through January and February. We saw the sun more. But yeah, still cold, still ready for summer. Who isn't, right?
Yeah. And I hate when it's dark in the morning and dark at night and so early. I love the long, sunny days, of course. It's all that sunshine is good for the soul. But at the same time, even sometimes when the weather is gorgeous, you just everybody has his days where you're just like lacking the motivation, right? And so what are some things, and I know I've said this 1,000 times on here, but for me, if I'm not taking care of myself physically and mentally, I am more prone to it, obviously. So good sleep. So like this weekend and last week, I just wasn't getting great sleep. I was probably having a little too much alcohol. So I'm trying to cut back on all of that. And my diet, nutrition was not great. I wasn't consistently exercising like I like to. And I could really tell. I could tell at work, I'm like, okay, like I don't have all the motivation I need to. But this week, I'm trying to really make it a priority to take care of myself so that when I'm at work, I'm in the best headspace that I can be in. And it hits already today. I felt a whole lot better about things. But for me too, and this is going to sound corny, sometimes when I'm at work, so, I'm in an administrative job right now, but I think back even, when I was in a fire station, if I would get to a place where I was like not feeling it, I will clean up my space. Because sometimes that's like an easy thing to do. Like for me at my desk at work, if I'm sitting there and I'm like, I just don't have it in me to tackle this big project right now, I do have it in me to straighten up my workspace. And so that was at my in my office at the fire station, or maybe it was a project like something straightening up something at the fire station. Doesn't require much mental ability. It doesn't require my brain to put in a whole lot of effort, but just the simple task of straightening it up or working on one simple project that didn't require a lot of brain power sometimes then kicked it in for me. And I know that probably doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's one way that I sometimes will get back in gear because now my space is all cleaned up. I've got everything organized. There's no clutter. That's at the fire station or in my office at work now. And now it's like, okay, now I'm ready to tackle something. Now I've cleared all this up. I'm ready to tackle something. Does that make sense? And I think that works at home too.
Yeah, and yeah, that makes absolute sense to me. And when you look at self motivation, I think you hit it. It's that self care first, and if we're not doing those things, we're going to be way behind, and it's going to be hard to find that internal motivation to do anything. So I definitely think it comes down to taking care of yourself, eating well, good sleep, taking care of your mental health, whether that be through seeing a therapist, journaling, meditating, reading, whatever floats your boat, whatever works for you, but that we are actually taking care of all those things. And I think another important aspect is having that, time to decompress and just be present, be present with your family, with your kids. If you need alone time just to sit and with your thoughts, whatever it is, like you have that time as well. So ensuring all those things are in place, I think is a necessary foundation to maintain inner motivation, because if you're missing a link there, it's just going to be hard to grab that motivation from the sky or somewhere else if we're lacking or not taking care of certain things.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And for me, sometimes when I'm not taking care of myself or not taking care of what needs to be taken care of, there's all these distractions that pop up.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm very easily distracted.
The power of procrastination comes in, right? It's somebody posted up on Facebook today, somebody that I respect greatly, Dr. Cody Todd, and she always posts up kind of stuff that gets you thinking. And she talked about hopelessness, right? And it saves us from ambiguity because there's always an answer, and that is, what's the point? So a lot of times when we lose that motivation, and we become hopeless, and then the answer is, well, what's the point? And there's always an answer. Well, why am I going to do that? What's the point? Why am I going to do that? What's the point? And then it's like just this, you get in this spiral, right? That just could take you, and it takes you. And sometimes I feel like that's the road I'm on, currently. And then hope, on the other hand, and having that motivation it could be messy, right? It might not work out. There are things to do, reasons to keep trying, but it's the possibility of change, right? And knowing that there's that possibility, but then at the same token, that's the stuff that could keep you spiraling and keep you going down this road that is very unmotivating. And there's the challenge, right? Therein lies the challenge when you get on that road of not being motivated, and we can use hopelessness or whatever. It's, how do you pull yourself out of that? And that's, if a lot of our listeners have answers, I'd love to hear them, because I think it's different for everybody. And sometimes it's different things. I could say I could go to the gym, cool, work out, feel better, taking care of your mental health, writing. I like to write and do some journaling, and all these little things help. But then at the same token, some of those things that just crush you and take away your motivation are a day away and going to hit you right in the face again. How do you stay resilient to that? And that becomes a very big challenge. And I think it becomes very challenging in our industry as well because, and in society, so many people just go misunderstood. So it's, how do you have these real conversations? How do you, and a lot of it comes down to picking yourself up, and that could become exhausting over time. So yeah, it's a challenge. I think it's a very hard challenge to stay motivated in today's climate in a lot of areas, not just our industry.
Yeah, that makes me think of when I first started looking at mental health in the fire service, and I took stress first aid and started looking at some of the military studies, and they talk about sometimes the difficulty in healing is that so many people get to this place where they feel like it's pointless. I will never feel better. I'm never going to get over this, or I'm never going to not feel this way. So why would I do all this work if it's never going to change? And it's a change. It's trying to do this change in mindset that there is hope. And so I'm glad you brought up that, hopelessness and hope conversation, because it really is creating. Yeah, it's hard. Sometimes it's hard work. It's hard work when you've got some mental health stuff going on, and it's hard work sometimes when you're lacking motivation, or you're in a toxic environment at work, or maybe you're in a toxic environment at home. It's like, why am I going to keep doing all of this work? It's never going to change. And that's that hopelessness, that mindset shift. And man, therapy, therapy's where it's at sometimes for that, for sure. Because it is hard work, and it is constant work to stay motivated, especially if you're not in a place that's supportive, or you're not in the culture where you work is not, really where you want it to be. And I love, obviously, the culture in our organization, but it doesn't matter. There's always you always get to a place sometimes where you're just lacking some self motivation, and a lot of times it's the awareness component. It's like being aware that it happens, and it happens to everyone, and it's not just you, and it's not a negative personality thing. It's just you know being aware of it. And once I'm aware of what's happening, then I can put stuff into place to start, fixing it. Like you said, be it journaling, which is something I used to write a ton, and I miss it. I really want to get back to journaling. And I've been listening to all these podcasts about like the morning routine, and, the 5 a.m. club, and all these successful people. And I just can't do it. I just can't get out of bed any earlier than like 6 o'clock. I'm like, I really want to. I really want to.
4 to 6 a.m. is an awesome time of day. I'm just gonna say that.
I know. And I hear that over and over. And like every podcast I'm listening to right now, it's like, I get up at blah, 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 and I journal, and I drink my coffee in peace, and I do all this stuff where I work out in the morning, and I know it, and I just have to do it. And I think that would help.
Yeah, I listen a lot some podcasts too, and reading a lot. I used to read a lot more than I do currently, and I kind of switched to writing because what I found with writing, and this may work for you or not, or I guess what I found with reading or listening to podcasts, like a lot of times when you're here, looking stuff to motivation or whatever, like everybody's saying the same thing. What if you're reading a book or listening to a podcast, it's just how they say it or their story. But at the end, it's like, well, this is what you got to do. You got to pick yourself up. And I'm like, duh, like I
Yeah.
know, but that's the problem. Like I
Yeah.
can't, like, so it's like, it's like nobody has those absolute answers for you. Like I can't tell you like this is what you're going to do and you're going to be motivated. Yeah, I don't think anybody can tell you, and I think that's kind of the crux behind it is how do you stay motivated? Well, here are some strategies that can help you. How do you pick yourself up? To give you that solid answer, like do step 1, 2, and 3, and you'll be good. That's what we want as people in the fire service, right? We're very logical. We're very practical. We like routine. Like, just tell me what I got to do and I'll do it, but it's
Yeah.
not that easy. It's a little more challenging. So with writing, what changed for me is, where you get to actually write down like what you're feeling inside and your emotions, and on a day to day, like you could see how it changes, and you can actually see the illustration of what days may be better, where you're feeling better inside, and the emotions aren't affecting you physically as much versus the bad days, and like just write about it, and it kind of is therapeutic in a way. And again, I'm not saying that's the answer for everybody, but when you can start putting a pen to paper and realizing why things are happening, why you feel that way, and really understand those emotions and what's underneath it all, is a really good place to be in terms of trying to build some motivation back.
So it's really interesting that you bring up the step by step thing, because it's so true. It's the same thing that we talk about when we talk about a recipe for leadership, that we can't give you this playbook, do this, then this will happen, do this, and this will happen, because everything is so dynamic. And the same thing goes for motivation, because what may work for me may not work for you. And what may work for me today may not work for me 6 months from now or tomorrow or next week, because everything is constantly changing in our world and our environments. And so for me, it's identifying first that something's going on, like I'm lacking motivation, and then deciding that I need to do something about it. Because sometimes when you're lacking motivation, you don't even want to fix it. You're like, here I am, in this space, and I'm just a bump on a log. And
Yep.
maybe that's okay sometimes, right?
Maybe it is okay sometimes. And, sometimes it's that thought like, well, this is it. And maybe it is it, and maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's going to push you in a different direction, and that's where, the motivation and hope could be somewhere else where you're not even looking, so it's having that outlook as well. But again, this stuff's not easy. And, the more that we discuss kind of what we talk about and you take this journey of growth, and I think when you take these journeys of growth is really when the trials come, because you're trying to improve yourself. You're trying to make better opportunities, become smarter, learn more, and do all these things. And in that process, as we grow, we tend to become different people, right? For me, it was letting go of my past and who I was. And, now you're living in new shoes, trying to figure all that out. And sometimes I'm like, man, it was easier living the old way, where you just coped your way through life. Because now it's like sometimes you lose that motivation, and it's hard because not only are you not motivated, then sometimes you're kind of lost too. So I think it comes down to, another thing, staying motivated is having your people you can lean on to. So even during those times of not feeling motivated, like they get you and they're not trying to get you back. And sometimes they just sit there with you. And I think that's the important part of having, people around you and good people around you that support you and are close friends and consider close friends, and that we've said this before, we say these terms brotherhood and sisterhood, but like this is where we fail at a lot of that. We're very good on being there for each other during some, extreme trials and stuff like that. But on the mundane day to day, I think that's where we fail our brothers and our sisters, that we don't try to understand them. And we just expect some type of behavior out of them. And if not, then it's, we go down this toxicity of a culture of what the industry has brought over years and years, So it's, and that's where we just can do better is really being there for each other on a day to day and helping people and picking them up when they're down. And even when they're down, just sitting with them sometimes, because sometimes that's all they need,
And I think for most of us in the fire service, we are hardwired to be high performers.
Yeah.
Go, go, perform, perform, next thing, on to the next thing, constantly trying to create the best way to do this thing or that thing or the next innovation or the next project or the next competition or whatever it is. We're just in this constant state of high performance, which makes us perfectly suited for this career. And I think sometimes we get burnt out from that. And we just did a whole episode of burnout, and that motivation slips a little bit. And I think that's where it's important. And you're talking about, the mundane support. It's that grace that,
Yeah.
that's my favorite values word, is grace is recognizing when your coworkers or your friends at work, they're not drive, 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 drive this month. Maybe they just need to take a break and they're gonna coast. But I bet you, for most of us, our lack of motivation and our lack, if we get in that space, is still pretty darn good. We're still performing pretty darn good. We just might not be like rock star status for a little bit and taking a little bit of a back seat. But it's so hard when you're a performer like that. And then you sit back for a bit and people are like, oh, what's wrong with them? Why aren't they, they're not doing as good. Well, it's like, no, I was just freaking killing it before. And now I'm just trying to average for the next couple months. Like,
Yeah.
right? So I think recognizing that in our industry is important, especially as leaders. If you've got some guys and girls that are just, you're pushing them and they are performing and doing it to it, and they are, coming up with all these new ways to do things, and they are just, exceeding all your expectations. If sometimes they aren't, it's important as a leader to recognize why, because there could be something negative going on that you need to coach or support through, but sometimes just a little bit of rest, or sometimes it's just a little bit of whew. I just need to, or maybe my focus is somewhere else right now just for a bit. Not in a bad way, just maybe I'm trying to kill it. Maybe I'm really working hard at something on the side, like I'm training for a marathon, or I'm not. Don't please don't. I'm not
I'm going to
training for
hold you to that now.
yeah, that's a no for me. Or like there's something else that's really important to you and you're working really hard at it. It doesn't mean you're, not as dedicated at work. It's just a little bit of a shift in focus. So I think that's important to put out there into the world as well.
Yeah. I believe that, that internal motivation is so, sometimes it's just hard to find where that's at, and that's where, as a industry, we could do better for each other. Developing your group of people, that you can lean on are very important things. And then I think this is a great time to kind of bridge it over to, I think one of the things for me too is that self-development. Like, how do you continue to develop yourself as a means to motivation, as a means to some other kind of hope that you don't even realize is out there. And so we can look at those self-development areas as well as a place for that internal motivation. And when we look at self-development, we can look beyond just the fire service. And for me and for our listeners, like I would highly encourage that self-development. Yes, we have to go do our training. We have to do our classes. Like, absolutely. I'm not taking any of that away, but anything beyond that, your personal time and stuff, it's like, get away from the industry. There is a whole world out there. There are a whole bunch of professionals and educators and so many people with different perspectives and different outlooks and things that you can learn, different sports, different activities. And it's just kind of getting away, that'll prevent burnout, that we talked about, but also just the bigger picture of, growing your knowledge base, and it will just help you overcome some of those difficult times you find in your life. The more educated we are, the more we experience life outside of our little bubble of the firehouse and the industry. It just makes you more well-rounded. And the more well-rounded you are, the easier, I think, and more resilient you can start to become.
Yeah, when I'm working on myself, and even like to go back to the motivation thing, like if I find something new that I'm interested in, it almost always flips that switch for me. And it's a lot of times, like you said, it's not something in the fire service, but if I'm working on something or I've found some new thing that I want to work on for me personally, or I'm learning about something, it always correlates over to me for work too. It's like way back when I first started listening to podcasts and I first started to read some stuff outside of the fire service, and I started to learn about the authentic leadership concept, which has been out for years now, but it made me so excited. I was like, oh yes, I love this. I love this so much. And I love what it could do for me and help me personally develop. And then at work, I had this whole new rejuvenation, and I wanted to share that information, but I also wanted to live it and figure out ways that I can incorporate it. And that always happens for me. So like, and for lately for me, it's been church. I've been just so excited to learn, not just, spirituality and going to church more, but like a lot of the history that I didn't know in the Bible. That has just made me excited at work. And I can't always like correlate how that happens, but it's like all the stories that I hear about Jesus and how he led people and treated people. I'm like, oh, this works at work too. I get all excited when I'm learning something new, and it always helps with my motivation. So
Yeah, you go back and read that and realize that nothing is new in this world, and I think that's
no,
kind of the cool part, right? Like all the stuff we
yeah,
talk about has been around for thousands and thousands of years, which is
yes,
pretty remarkable. And it's just, sometimes I was thinking about, it was maybe earlier today, like how did we get so far away from simplicity? Like everything is so complicated nowadays,
oh, it
and
is.
it's like, it doesn't have to be that way. We overcomplicate everything, everything in our job, everything in our households, like everything, and I think I might have been putting something together because, yeah, this was earlier today. And then I was like, like I think value when I look at values, it's like simplicity is a value, like peace and simplicity. Like let's just go back to like all this mundane, regular daily stuff. Like none of this matters, or and the time and effort into a lot of this stuff doesn't matter. And why are we doing it? And again, that's a different outlook and it can help with motivation, just trying to reel yourself back in from just go 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 to how about we simplify things? Because if we simplify things, a lot of times it's a lot less stress and it makes more sense and it's easier and it's more enjoyable, right? So it's just like reeling it back into like this simple life, like this simple ideology. It's like there's not bad just because it's simple, right? There's a lot of good when things become simple. And I think a lot of times things can go bad when we overcomplicate it. And that's where, we can start losing motivation and, the wheels are turning and the research and they're trying to figure it out and all this other stuff. And it's like, hold on a second, take a break, simplify
Yeah.
it and we're
And
good.
that's interesting because that happened in our department. So, like I've said before, all of us, from the fire chief down, we're young. And so when we all kind of came into our positions, we all had all of these ideas. And it was a lot of stuff that needed to be fixed in our organization, stuff that, you know, we were just behind on and we needed to kind of get figured out and dialed in, some procedure stuff that needed to be, written down and delivered, and some programs that we needed. But what we did was like boom, 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 boom. And it was like this whirlwind of, really high level EMS expectations and performance and equipment. And then tactical guidelines and policy changes and just all this stuff. And it was all such good stuff, but it came out so fast. And you could just tell people were like, oh gosh, what are they going to come up with next? And it was this sensation of, we should have celebrated our wins.
Yeah.
We should have said, here's the thing. And it's good. And it's so exciting. And it's so awesome because they were good. It was all good things. And let it sit, make it simple. Here's the thing. Let's do the thing and let's sit with it. Instead, we just kept rolling and rolling, and it had the opposite effect. It really, you know, shut people down, and people were like, what is going on? And people couldn't quite, people could keep up with the performance end, but I think it was just exhausting and it wore people down.
Yeah, you're right. And when you see that kind of change, it's like the expectation then, and historically in our society, you better know it, you better know it, you better know it. And then if you don't, then what, and, you push out a lot of change like that. And it could have the opposite effect where you lose motivation, you lose your people and all that stuff. So it's like that simple mind just come back. Like, you look at the job at the end of the day, our job, like if there's something on fire, what do? We put water on it. That's right. There's a lot that goes
Mhm.
into that. I'm
Yeah.
not taking anything away from that. But at the end of the day, things get a lot better when we put water. And that's it.
Yeah.
Like we take a hose and we put water on a fire. Like that's
I know.
pretty.
Have you seen that old video? And it's like, he's like, what do the fire department meetings look like in the morning? He's like, all right, guys, we're gonna put water on the fire. And then he talks about the fire SUV showing up. He's like, what does the fire SUV do? Like, have you seen that video?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really funny.
Yeah, and for some of our listeners out there, I think some people could appreciate that. I may or may not have had bosses like you're getting on a car fire, and they're like pointing at the fire, and you're like, "Oh, you want me to put this water on that? Oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know." Like,
Yeah.
duh,
Yeah.
like you don't need to
Yeah.
point that out. I got it. It's and it's just that simplicity, that simple mind, and sometimes it's just so complicated and convoluted then, and becomes something way more than what our job shouldn't be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I love the idea of, slowing down and simplifying, because I know for me personally, when I've got way too much going on, it's just not good. It's not a good thing here in the Henderson household. So the simple stuff, it helps at work, it helps at home. That's all good stuff too.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Nope. Nope.
It's our personalities. It's the
Yeah.
people drawn to this profession that we can fix it all
Yeah.
and we can do it all. And that's a good thing. That's a good trait to have, that these are the people that you want working with you and alongside you, because they're gonna always figure it out, right? That's in our personalities. No matter what's happening, we're always gonna figure it out. But it does lead to some burnout and sometimes some lack of motivation. And that's what we're here to try to figure out. Because and our listeners can probably tell, Kyle and I don't have the answer. Both of us are struggling with it in different ways, or
Oh
it
yeah.
comes and goes for both of us. And it's just neat to talk about and figure out some stuff. And maybe where, for me, a lot of times, I think it's because all this therapy I'm doing lately, but I think lately it's not always the solution, it's the why.
Yeah.
It's the prevention, it's the why, where, what's going on. And then usually sometimes that fixes it. Like, why am I in this funk that I'm in?
Yeah.
And there's not always this big solution. It's just, wonder how I got here.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And then it's the patience while you're in that funk, right? Like you just got to,
Yeah.
sometimes you got to ride the wave and you don't know how long
Yeah.
it's going to last for, and that could be very challenging, but it's the ebb and flows of life, and I think that's why like conversations like this just need to happen more and be more. It's not a soft conversation. These are real conversations to help our brothers and sisters, right? Like, and people will say this is soft, well, we're getting soft. We can't have these conversations. No, because we're all at different points. Some people are really motivated. Some people might not be motivated. And it's like, we could help each other out and sit like, just all this stuff and just do a better job of industry wide. Cause as you said, we're high performers. And I think with that and understanding that, there needs to be a proactive approach, not a reactive, a proactive approach, understanding that people in our industry are going to lose motivation and they are going to get burnout. So how do we deal with that? And those are the
Yeah.
conversations as leaders or people in leadership roles need to be having, is what are our tactics against an unmotivated workforce, an unmotivated person? How can we help alleviate that? How can we sit with them through that? Because we need to allow them to go through that. How can we help them learn and grow through that? Like, these are the conversations. This is what we need to be doing to help our people out and become better firefighters and better at our job, because these things are going to happen. We're telling everybody it's going to happen. It's going to happen in your career. It's going to happen. But how can we better deal with it is really the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And encouraging, like we were just talking about, encouraging that personal self-development, I think is a good place for leadership to start. So I think for a long time we pushed, only fire classes, all fire things. Everything should be focused on this department and the job you are doing here, which is, it's important to have a lot of dedication to your organization, but it's also important to obviously be dedicated to yourself and your family and whatever else it is that makes you Kyle, that makes me Kerry, because that makes me so much better at work. So the personal development that I do, it just makes me so much better. And I actually lose motivation less often when I'm working more on myself, when I'm being selfish.
Yeah. And that's okay, right? That's definitely okay. I think one of the biggest things that I try to tell a lot of they don't like to listen. And it's interesting to me because I think they have a huge opportunity ahead of them. I see a lot of changes in the future in our industry. And I keep telling them, you all need to go to college, go to school, you know, th- and the response you get, I don't need a piece of paper. A piece of paper isn't going to do this, but it's more than a piece of paper. Every experience in life is what we take from it, right? We can make it just a piece of paper, or you can make it a thing where you start using different parts of your brain, right? Where we learn a deep analytical ability, where we do research, where we learn things about ourselves we might not have even known, even though it's through a formal education. If it's sitting in rooms or chat rooms with a group of people from different walks of life that you get to meet and interact with and learn and grow from. So I think, when we look at self-development and motivation, I am a big supporter of formal education. Sure, there's bad things about it. Totally get it. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but it's like, what are you going to take out of that experience? What are you going to take away from that formal education? Because there is a lot you can take away. And in 10, 15, 20 years, especially from now, I could see degrees being mandated in a lot more organizations if, because the recruitment issue will eventually, you would think, turn around. and I could see degrees being required and things of that nature. And nowadays, if you want to go for promotion, you want to be a chief one day, like get your education, especially when you're young, and you don't have a family yet or all this stuff. Like that could just start you off on a strong foundation on building that self development and start learning some different strategies in your mind that are just going to help you develop into a better leader and develop strategies to, combat some of this stuff that we're talking about in terms of lack of motivation and burnout and things like that.
Yeah, I think if I took nothing away from my college experience, like let's say I learned nothing in any of my classes, the professors I had that taught me to be a critical thinker, because so many times you'll hear people, they have an opinion on something, or maybe they don't even think it's an opinion. They believe this is fact. But all the teachers and professors that said, "Why do you think that way? Where did that opinion come from?" Or you want to put it in a paper, this happened because of this. And they'll say, "Well, where did you learn that information? Where is the facts that back that up? Or where is the facts that support your opinion?" And I think becoming a critical thinker in our jobs, I mean, obviously it's super critical on calls, but you you can't just like if you're in a higher up level position in the fire service, you can't just say, "We need this because I say so." There has to always be a why, and there has to be always this critical thinking behind the decision making, and you can't just say it's because you think so or because that's your opinion. So,
Yeah, yeah,
critical thinking is big. It's big in higher education.
yeah, absolutely. A lot of value there, and I like for me, it was just a big growth point again, building that foundation on being able to think and analyze and research and do all this stuff. So when you start looking at some of the stuff we're talking about in terms of motivation, you just more tools in your brain, right? It's more, it allows you a deeper understanding of things as well. And I think that's important because so much is so far beyond the surface level that so many experience life at. It's so much more below that surface level stuff. And having that formal education, I think just helps build some of that ability to go beneath the surface and really evaluate, make decisions, and kind of help in the long run. Anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I hadn't thought about, that education component and how that tied in with what we're talking about. So, good point. Good.
Yeah, there's always a lot, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, for the motivation, that is really that is a challenge, I think, in this day and age, in many aspects, not just our industry. And it's very hard sometimes. Like I get it, for our listeners. Like if you're struggling, I get you. I'm with you.
Mhm.
I know what you're going through, and I wish I just had all these simple answers for you. And unfortunately, I don't. But it's just how do we build that resilience, and how do you come out of it the other side. I was just listening to Jocko, which most people probably out there know Jocko, and
Yeah.
his response to everything is good, right? You work in a toxic environment, good. That's going to make you better, right? That you didn't get the promotion, good. That means you're going to work harder to go for it next time. So, it's changing that mindset. And again, much easier just to sit here and have that conversation and say, hey, just change your mindset. You'll be good, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just do that. Duh. So much harder to actually do it. But that could just be a start. Like look at everything, you flip that glass around and look at it differently. And you just don't know. You just don't know where it's going to take you. But it's about, when it's about creating opportunities for yourself as well, and just becoming a more diverse individual. The more diverse you are, the more opportunities available to you. Sometimes lacking motivation in one area is going to push you to another area. And that's where you were always meant to be anyway. So you just never know, I guess.
Yeah, you don't. And it's also kind of the beauty of our industry is that, we can move around. A lot of times we have the ability to get into something else. So if you're lacking some motivation and you we can move around departments, obviously. Well, in Virginia we can. We can easily move around departments, but not just that. Like there's so much stuff you can get into in our industry. So if like you're super interested in, EMS here, you can go get your critical care paramedic. You can do all this other stuff. You could be a flight medic. You could, if you're super interested in forcible entry, you could be a pro at it's just all this stuff. And I think that is the beauty of our industry too. So there's always something you can get into.
Yeah, I think it's a beauty, but I think it could also be a curse.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because then you get the people who just go after and keep doing, doing, doing. And then at the end of the day, there's really no path for that, getting all, and maybe I'm just speaking Illinois specific, right? A lot of the promotional process is dictated by state law, and based on timing and when promotions are happening versus when the tests are coming out, like you just could get stuck, right? And there's no career path for you, regardless of how involved you got and how you did all this stuff. And a lot of times that could be crushing in and of itself, right? People put all this time and effort into things, and then promotional time comes out and it's locked up for the next 10 years. And you're like, well, why did I do all that? I just busted my tail and I'm never going to get promoted. And a few episodes you talked about, breaking up like EMS specific, fire specific, and actually creating career paths for people. And I think that's a great idea because right now, especially in Illinois, smaller department, there is no career path. Like a lot of times you're going to get to a position, you're going to get stuck there because there's just no movement. And it's the luck of the draw of when you got hired and when you got promoted. Like that's it. Sorry. And moving around department to department as a lieutenant or a shift commander, that doesn't happen here. You're going to start all the way at the beginning. So, having a career path where people could continually stay motivated to know that if they put the time and effort in, there is a chance they will get promoted. Whereas, here, if the timing doesn't work out, no matter how hard you work or time and effort, there's no chance, and that's unfortunate, and that could be a motivation killer for a lot of people too.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. I was thinking more like, not full-time thing, like getting interested in something and serving on committees or like revamping your hose load on your truck and doing a project on that, or like you're laughing. But like that's stuff in our department. That's how stuff kind of comes about as our guys take the initiative and go, hey, I think we could do this better. And they work on it and they'd make a committee or a work group and then they propose it and they travel around to the other stations and demonstrate it and kind of try to get people on board with it. And kind of evolved.
I'm just laughing because I've been there 14 years and we've probably had like 25 different hose loads.
Oh yeah.
And then you get yelled at for not knowing which one is on the rig. And you're like, really, dude? Yeah. Like, I'm just going to pull some loops. Can we just do that? Like I said, simplify things.
Yeah.
Give me a couple loops. We're good. I don't care what's up there.
Yes. So, well, good stuff. Good stuff.
Always is. It's always fun where it ends up, right?
Yeah, it is. It really is. So you this week will be at the Women of Fire in Illinois speaking, right?
Well, yeah, this will air the 8th, so I'm just getting done. So on the 6th. Okay. So this past Saturday, I was at the Fire Service of Women Illinois Leadership Symposium. So yeah.
Fantastic.
And we'll talk about that. And then you got FDIC coming up, right?
Yes, leave the 14th.
Very
on
cool.
the 14th to the 20th. Yeah.
Great month of April.
Yeah. And my birthday.
When's your birthday?
The 14th.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Yep. All right, listeners. Thanks for sticking with us again. If you have any suggestions or anything you want us to chat about, find us on our Facebook page or Instagram page and shoot us some comments, messages on there, and we'd be happy to host an episode about your topic. Looking to get some more interviews coming in soon, interviewing some guests and giving you guys some feedback on the conferences we're attending and all the good stuff. So until next week, take care.
As we wrap up another episode, this has been Kyle
and Kerry
from the Heat of Command podcast.
Thank you, as always, for listening. Please make sure to follow and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And as always, we love the feedback. Keep it coming.
See you next time.